What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we're back for some more story time. And I've got a double header for you. Tony, as always, you're here for our story time. We're working our way through real time, our real future.
Real future.
But
We're
we have
on our way to the shit burger that is this island Earth. We are on our way. Yes, it has been quite the journey so far. I've heard from multiple people, as I'm sure you have, Mr. Weatherly, that this is something people are saying this is an excellent companion to your other show, Stories Out of Time and Space, and they are anxiously. People have said, "How dare you tease us with Total Recall and not have that out the next day?" So the fans are clamoring.
They are waiting for this. And as you make it, what a wonderful segue you made there as well about the sister podcast, Stories Out of Time and Space. It's out there. Go check it out. Because we could not do such a great sci-fi franchise or sci-fi film without my brother from another mother from the sister podcast. Julian Darius is also joining us today. Hi, Julian. Are you doing okay?
I'm just here because I have 3 breasts.
Yeah. It's something's in the water. That's what it is. We're of a certain generation. There was something in the water. That's what I'm putting down.
That's what happened.
Yeah. I like it.
Wow.
And weirdly enough, I like to dress up as a large middle-aged woman in a ginger wig, and
I mean, people
try and
can't
get through
see,
customs.
but I have mine on right now.
Yes. So yes,
we're all cosplaying.
That's it.
We're all
Yeah.
cosplaying.
None of us is Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is the fun part. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be talking
I'm
about
going to do my
Total
Sharon
Recall.
Stone Verhoeven moment later, so we'll see. We'll see what happens with what I'm. You guys can't see you can't see what I'm wearing downstairs. We don't know.
But I've got some sort of, let's say, a basic instinct about what it is that's going to be going on. So we are going to go through this in the usual order. We will start with the original story written by Philip K. Dick. We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, which I believe was 1950. I don't have to check that. And then we will go on to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Paul Verhoeven version in 1990, and then to 2012 and the Colin Farrell reimagining. It's an interesting one, but we shall get to it. So, guys, let's go back then. Let's start some PKD. Julian, you're the first one. You're the guest. You're sort of new to the story time. Let's start then. Philip K. Dick and We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. What are your initial thoughts on this intro story?
Well, I think, unfortunately, first of all, you forced me to read something for this, which is hard for me as an American, just, But no, I mean, I think my impression of it is typical of sort of everything I read by Philip K. Dick. So great ideas, and I'm sort of lost halfway through and am irritated by Dick's prose in places. You two are just gonna love it, and I'm gonna be like,
no,
yeah, it's not quite Shakespeare, is it?
It is not.
It's one of those weird ones, actually. I'll ask Tony a minute. But you're not wrong. I've always struggled reading Philip K. Dick. Like, it took me like 3 attempts to read Do Androids Lead a Dream of Electric Sheep? Like, it's not even a thick novel, like not a thick book. His prose is not easy to wade through. This isn't something you can read where you sat in bed just before you go to bed. Like, it's not easily decipherable. And one of the questions I'm gonna ask when we get to the end of this story. Obviously, Verhoeven goes for the full sort of like violent satire. Is this story a satire? Is it supposed to be funny? Because I don't know when we get to the end of it. But we'll ask that question. Tony, what are your thoughts then? Opening thoughts on this story.
So this is the first time in story time where I read the story first before before the movie came out. Like, I looked, by the way, it was 66. It was late Dick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. which is also the name of my prog rock band. And he he I'm one of those people who keeps coming back to him because, as Julian said, brilliant ideas, not always interestingly executed, and that is why I think he's so rife for adaptation, because he's a big picture guy. He's like, he asks a question that he can't answer, and like Man in the High Castle, the one, like, I've read Do Androids Dream several times. The Julian and I were texting not that long ago about the comic book adaptation, the Boom Studios one, which is the entire novel, like the balls of them to be like, we're not going to adapt it. Like the whole text is in the comic, but we're just going to put a visual to it. So it's like going to be, you know, blah, 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 blah. He said,
it's like reading it.
Yeah,
like reading early issues of Spawn, basically.
100%. That is a tone, man. It is a monster.
Yeah.
But I come back to Dick over and over, and I always have most of my life from teenage on. I've discovered him as a teenager, as nerds do. Some nerd has a wise Yoda nerd who is like, "Have you read Dick?" And you're like, "What?" And then the world opens, and you're like, "Holy shit!" So I there's something there, like that he's easily adaptable, and this is one of those things. I was like, oh, I get it, I get what you did. Doesn't land it. The Man in the High Castle series I loved that show, and it really took a turn from the book. But again, the book, that was his unfinished final novel. But really, could you tell? That's the thing with Dick. You're like, how do I know if it's unfinished? Like, some of your stuff, you'll just like stop in the middle of a thought. Yeah, right. So I enjoyed it. I agree. It is dense. It is hard to, but again, I come back to this probably like the 10th or more time I've read this story. And so that says something about it, right? It's frustratingly good that'll be it. You put that on the poster.
Yeah.
Philip K. Dick, frustratingly good. And maybe even a question mark like that. So that was my way. And I don't know how old I was. I was, in the early to mid 80s, I read it. And then, then the movie came out shortly thereafter. So, I'm still pleased every time I read it. I'm like, all right, I forgot this part. That happens a lot with him. And it's only like 20 pages. It's not like it's not like Blade. It's not like Androids. It's not like Man in the High Castle. But yeah,
it's still, like I said, but it's dense. I think that's the thing.
It is
with this. And
the word trudge is in the third sentence. That says everything you need to know.
Yeah, I'd also say, like, considering how sort of, like, it wants to be the future, it's got these big ideas. It still seems sort of stuck in. Well, the opening itself is almost like a sitcom level wedding. This sort of sitcom level marriage of like unhappy husband, whiny wife, and it's it's so stereotypical that you're just like, okay, fine, but that's got to lead to something. And the Douglas Quayle of this, not Quaid, but the Doug Quayle of this book, it's less about, this sort of idea of, is he or isn't he a secret agent on this mission? It seems less, what's I'm trying to think, when you've got like Arnie playing, or even Colin Farrell, like, you go, oh, there isn't there? Like, you could be this thing. But with this guy, like, you don't get a visual of him. At no point does he say, like, middle-aged, pudgy, balding, 5'3" guy, Doug Quayle. So you never know what he looks like, which is fine, because but the mystery never seems to sort of materialize for me with the same intensity. It never feels like there's stakes to it. It's sort of like, even he's a bit like, oh, I might have gone to Mars. Might not have done. I don't know. And it just seems so sort of shoulder shruggy throughout the middle that I'm like, as I'm reading it, I'm sort of like, you say about trudge, I'm sort of like, well, no one in the story seems to really care. So do I? I don't know. It just feels like, like you get to the end, and it's like, that's where I thought, like, is it a joke? Because the end is obviously another, spoilers, by the way, we're going to spoil the hell out of this. Is this sort of like, oh, we're going to wipe it all and give him this other thing so he doesn't, talk about it. We're going to give him this idea of he saved humanity by stopping an invasion by miniature aliens. And then the joke is, oh, that might have been true as well. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't, like you saying, Julian, like, I don't know. I don't fully understand it. Or I'm like, is this happen? Like, it's not a case of like you can weave a way through this and go, there's evidence for this or there's evidence for that. I just get to the end and I'm like, was this a really long setup to a shitty punchline? I don't get it.
It seems to me that it's like a 2000 AD strip or like an O. Henry twist that
Yes.
just goes in, gives you that twist, and then says, now watch how quickly I could do infinite regression of like, but that was a memory, and that was a false memory, and that was a false memory. And it's so in love with that device. And as you say, it's almost all dialogue. It's very quick, it's very punchy. Dick almost never does that sort of long physical description grounding you. He goes right to the dialogue, short, punchy sentences, which, to his credit, it's a style, but you get so lost in the infinite regressions that, as you say, Scott, it's sort of like, am I supposed to care here or just be delighted by, it's another twist? M. Night Shyamalan read this.
Yeah, I agree. You say about physical, I don't know, take a note. The one real physical element we get in this is that the receptionist is topless and has her boobs sprayed different colors.
Yep.
Don't know not sure what to take from that, but it was the 60s. Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems to be.
Yeah, it was a thing. It was all the drugs. I don't know. I think so your question, is it supposed to be satire? Is he satire? So you can do science fiction in a bunch of different ways, right? You can do it earnestly. You can do it, which we'll talk about in a minute when we get to Verhoeven and his take, what Verhoeven does and how he's like, fuck your earnestness. Fuck you, Philip K. Dick. Fuck you, Robert Heinlein. He makes movies as a fuck you to the source material that he also sort of loves. And so I think the problem is the two are so inextricably linked for us. Even though I did read this first, obviously I have a way better visceral memory and care more for the 1990 film than I do for the story. But I keep coming back to the story because, again, I keep wanting it to be more. Because I do think Dick is one of those guys who probably couldn't sell stuff today, but in the 60s, this was a job, was to every magazine, like Kurt Vonnegut was rich man selling stories. Now, Vonnegut's a better writer than Dick, at me, people. But Vonnegut, because Vonnegut wouldn't publish it if the idea wasn't complete in his mind. You may feel frustrated with it, but that's the idea he wanted out there. When Billy Pilgrim is unstuck in time, so are you. And you're like, wait, Kurt Vonnegut's in this book too. What the fuck is going on? And it makes you feel real. And he plays with you, where Philip Dick isn't having any fun. So that's what also makes me leave.
You say he's not having fun, and there was almost there's a point in this book, and it comes up twice, which is why when I thought it may have been a joke. They talk about him, the experience, what it is to have your memory inserted, right? So this isn't like in the films. They have it as like you're fully aware that it's a memory. You're fully aware that we have given you this, And there's in Recall in the films or at least in the Verhoeven one, they say you get ticket stubs and you get souvenirs and all this other stuff, but you don't forget that you've been to Recall. They never mention that, but in the story, they make a point of we basically take 2 weeks of your life and we make you believe you went to Mars or Saturn or wherever the hell you want to go, and you can have postcards and photos and ticket stubs and so on and so forth. But then they go on about the fact that you won't remember you've been to Recall. But then within 2 lines, he says, and if you're not satisfied, you can come back and get a refund. And he says that comes up twice in the story. And I'm like, that's got to be a joke because you've literally told them they don't know they've been to Recall. So it's sort of like almost like a corporate loophole of going like, we can make an absolute pig's ear of this. It could be a nightmare for you, but you don't know you've been here. So I didn't know if it was like, is this a joke at terms and conditions? But I wasn't sure if that was a kind of thing in the 60s. But he says he's not having fun, but I think he's trying to have fun. I literally think this is him trying to be fun. And it's almost like that person who doesn't quite understand what a joke is telling a joke.
That could be totally true. That could be. I hear what you're saying. I get it. That does make sense. But it's like because he's commenting on Clark and Asimov's earnest unfun but brilliant science fiction, right? He's commenting on them. And so that is so to me, is it satire? I don't know. Is he questioning them? Maybe. And he's like, oh, Arthur Clarke, do you really need 2,000 words to describe that one thing? Yeah, maybe. And Asimov, do you need to tell it that long? Maybe, but they both could write short stuff too. So I feel like he is trying to write an earnest commentary on that other stuff, whereas like other people of his era, Vonnegut in particular, who I feel like the two of them, I think that was it. The person was like, oh, you like Vonnegut? Have you read Dick? And again, that's like saying, oh, do you like Pepsi? You should try Jack Daniels. They're not the same, but just because they're both beverages, you lump them together. But that people put Vonnegut and Dick together, where one is having fun and one isn't. One is doing big ideas that he doesn't know how to land. So is he commenting on Asimov and Clarke? Possibly. I don't know, Julian, you keep on miking and I keep rambling, so I'm gonna shut up. You go, Dr. D.
No, it's just random clicking. No, I think the remarkable thing there, and I like your point, Scott, your idea there. I think the remarkable thing is how, to your point, Tony, that it's almost like the story is totally unstable. And part of what I love about Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep is like, the mood alterator, and like it really paints what it's like to live in this society. And I love the B plot that's not in Blade Runner at all. Here it's like there's no stable, it's like almost meaningless to even wonder, like, is that a joke? Because everything's going to be unstable. It's like the rug is pulled out from under you the second any fact is established. The next 2 paragraphs later will tell you that, but that's not actually true.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if he's trying to make a point of like, how much you can't trust memory, fine, but then the plot should have to be more about that. Because again, like, this is the thing I sort of took from this. It seems to just information, like you said, Julian, sort of drops in and then drops out again, quite sort of like intermittently. He, goes to recall. They put him in the on the table. They're going to do the thing, and then they call in the boss, and he's sort of like, listen to this, because they're going to give him this interplanetary spy trip to Mars for 2 weeks or whatever. And then like in his haze, he sort of like has this gravelly sort of, pulp fiction kind of spy voice all of a sudden, and he's sort of like, you don't know what it's like to go to Mars, kind of all that. And it's like, oh no, he's really been like, and they're like, okay, we'll get rid of him, sort of thing. But and then there's all this thing about dried up worms and little plants and all this other stuff that's like, oh, that's proof he's been there. And you go, okay. And I'm going, okay, that sounds like an odd thing to have as a spy. Like he smuggled this in, and he has memories of smuggling this in. And then later on, it just sort of mentions, it builds up to this idea of, oh yeah, no, I was an assassin, and I was trained for 5 years to become an assassin. And you go, okay, all right, that seems to have just come out of nowhere, and it's sort of not really explained. And like you say, it's barely mentioning it, but it's never sort of resolved. And say, oh, there's who trained him? What's it for? There's a wider plot here. And then obviously the government seemed to get involved later on, but like you say, but that seems to just drop out, and there becomes this other thing of, that's when like the alien thing comes in. Like it's unstable in the sense of like following this as a narrative. Yes, events happen in an order, but I am literally going like, sorry, I've got to go 2 pages back just to check something that's happened in this short story to reaffirm what I'm reading now. And I don't mind doing that so much. If it was like a mystery, if something's revealed and it's go, oh, this was hinted at 2-3 pages ago. Oh my God, they're actually finally revealing this thing. Fine. But it's more a case of I'm reading going, I think that seems to contradict something that was said 2 pages ago. And I'm having to check. So it just feels like that where is he trying to present the muddled consciousness that Quayle is feeling? If he is, then he's quite successful. I don't know.
It seems to me like the box of worms could be a sort of signifier for a painful moment where you discover this and you're like, oh my God, this is real. I have these memories that define me that I don't know. And it almost gets there. And then it sort of becomes, well, that could have been planted anyway. But it seems that that's one, like you can do that and sort of have a sort of Schrodinger's cat, like, well, it could serve two meanings in two different versions of reality. But that's one of, it seems to me, several signifiers, right? Including the refund. Like, why are you refunding half the money, right? Like, that's going to track you right back to recall. You refund it or you don't. And he just says, like, it seems fair. And then the aliens, like, is another sort of signifier. So there are these kind of like signifiers, these things that in a, this is not an Agatha Christie story. These would be clues in a more stable narrative. They sort of become these signifiers, but then they are just kind of floating signifiers that sort of evoke ideas, but never signify anything and it's not even clear what their primary signified would be, let alone that they might have two, as in the case of the worms, which I think is probably the best kind of thing like that in the story. But it seems very strange to me that he sets these symbols up and then they almost never have a meaning to begin with, let alone a meaning to then subvert. So you get these subversions of something that its original meaning hasn't been set up, and sometimes the subverted meaning isn't set up, and then it's subverted again.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's true, and I do. And again, sometimes it's like you again, he gets away with it because there was a need for stuff, right? There's a need for stuff, and we need content, and this guy's published stuff, and it could I don't know the history of this, but this is again middle of he was already a name at this point in time by the time this got published, because like Philip K. Dick has a new story out, and so that's going to be it. And again, I like I said, I've read almost everything he's written. I come back to him over and over again because again of the ideas, like Julian said, he gives me ideas and he lets me think of things, and he makes me think. Well, not necessarily how do I make it better, but what is he hinting at? What is he getting? What does he want me to think about? Like you mentioned the money thing. That was my thing. So that goes back to the title. Remember it for you wholesale. So this does go back to this idea that it is all just a scam. The title, like, if you make the title part of the story and the fact that you only get half the refund and this is all a scam, and that then the truth is, this guy was like all of the things are real. He was a secret agent. He was in Interpol or whatever they call it, Interplan. He was all those things. There was some other real technology that this guy who's like sleazy, hey, Bob McLean here, I got this cool thing. I'm gonna come get you. Him, all of that stuff is all a fake racket. He just happened to get like almost it right. And the fact that instead of just giving him his money back, he's like, oh shit, wipe his memory, give his money back and go away. It would go away, but because he's a scam artist, because he's a shyster. So there is these two layers happening. So it leads me to believe, my read on this story always has been, is that Quayle is for real the secret agent, and Bob McLean, shyster, fucked up and backed into it. And like Dan Quayle, former vice president and giant douchebag, Doug Quayle is the protagonist, but the story is about McLean and his bullshit and like Total Recall as a company. Is it real? Is it not real? And it's like, just think about, this is, pre-internet, pre-anything, but like we all know about getting spammed with shit, right? We all know like our works all have to have like, because people will hack the new president of the university where Julian and I work, his email has been hacked already and he's been there less than a year. And you get an email, it's like, hey, can you send me your phone number? I need to talk to you. I'm like, no. You're the president. You have my number if you need it. I'm not. That's a weird thing to, that's a hack. And so, but there's always somebody who's trying to sell you something. There's always trying to get something for nothing. And so the fact is, like, we'll sell it for you wholesale. That's a sales pitch, right? Like, especially in America. I don't know how you guys buy cars in the UK, but like in America, that's always the thing. Is like, you don't pay sticker price. You got to haggle. That's exhausting. I don't want to. I actually walked out on a guy who was trying to sell me a car. He's like, hey, and he called me slick in the middle of the sales pitch, and I was done. I was like, we're done. I'm not buying a car from you. And I walked next door to the neighboring car place and said to the guy, just sell me a car. That is the price. And don't give me a bunch of bullshit. And I bought a car from like in an hour. That other guy is like driving away, flipping him off. So there is this like weird, so to me, that's the social commentary, is on the selling of garbage in the way that will and sometimes you accidentally bump into something. So, so there's two ideas, they can't resolve themselves. That's my theory. I could be wrong. I like to be wrong.
Well, it's interesting. Julian, you got something you want to throw in?
I just want to say that seems, I like what Tony's saying. It seems so Philip K. Dick, right? Like, the thing that I love about Philip K. Dick is that everybody is slimy, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like, Philip K. Dick, like there's no Arnold Schwarzenegger, there's no, like glowing white hope, everybody is just a sleazy slime ball, and in private, we're all disgusting, petty people.
That's so true.
And so that fits perfectly with my impression of Phil K. Dick. And I do have to say, I've always been not understood the title. Up until this reading, I always saw the title as We Can Remember Them For You Wholesale, as in wholesale volume, not at wholesale price. But that's not as catchy. So I always thought, well, this is, we could just do a whole lot of memory implants real cheap.
That's good though. That's true.
Kind of happens. But no, I like what you're saying, Tony.
Okay, I see what you're saying. The best, especially about the slimy characters, because there is nobody is likable in this,
or in most of his books.
Yeah,
as Julian is saying, there's nobody like. You don't read Man in the High Castle, you're like, Juliana Crane is awesome. Like, that's the one problem with the show, is that everybody loves Juliana Crane. She's an asshole. Like, I don't get it. Like, Lee and I will talk about it. Like, by the time we got to the end of that series, we're like, and I would we'd look at each other every once in a while, like, do you love Juliana Crane now? Because, like, for no reason, even, like, everybody falls in love, like, the gay guy falls in love with Juliana Crane. Everybody's in love with Juliana Crane. But she's an asshole in this story. And I get it, that doesn't work. You need Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? You need her. You need Alexa Davalos. You need her. Like, you can't have, because she's charming and commands the screen. She should be the lead. Schwarzenegger should be the lead. I get it, but you're so right, Julian. Everybody sucks in all of his stories, no matter who the hero is. Decker is the worst. Like, when they were like, Harrison Ford, we're gonna have you play Decker. He's like, if you read that book, that guy's the worst. Like, I don't want to. We'll change it. Don't worry.
I'm not playing this slime ball.
Yeah,
right.
You want me in your movie? You make me hero.
Even change the name from Quail. I'm not going to play a quail. I'm not a bird to be followed around.
Well, we will talk about it. So I've just been reading a book called The Last Action Heroes, and there's some stuff about this, the what's it version.
Yeah.
But the thing, to talk about the action movies that have come out of this, one of the things that struck me about this story that I thought that just made me sort of the reason again I keep thinking this is a joke, or at least like a joke on me maybe, is that the memories that may or may not be true are the better, more interesting stories. So when he comes through it all, he's like, this is either the story of an individual that was chosen at random and trained for 5 years to become a spy, to infiltrate a group, to kill someone, and then had to have their memory wiped. And then we find out, actually, that person, as a child, actually saved the world from invasion by being a thing, and actually was given a death gun by the aliens, which he then used to commit the assassination. And I'm going like, oh man, that sounds like an amazingly sort of like, out there kind of thing that the guy who played, like, what's his name? Harrison, the guy who plays like Stainless Steel Rat. Like, you're going to go all out crazy with that kind of thing. I'm going, but that's not in here. I'm reading this weirdly sort of like cold, kind of dense drudgery, but all I'm thinking is going, I kind of want to read the story about the spy that was trained for 5 years to kill this person, or the Spielberg version where it's about a little boy that, like, sort of negotiates with an invading alien force to save the planet. Like, I thought, like, hang on, this feels like it's a joke on me that I'm having to read. I'm reading the boring bit, or I'm remembering the more exciting stuff. So I thought it was kind of ironic that this has led to 2 rather exciting action films, which is sort of like what this is trying to avoid being. But yeah.
It is. Well, that is interesting, because that is something I wanted to discuss about Dick writ large with you guys before we made the move. So that's a good segue, my friend. For whatever reason, we keep wanting to turn Philip K. Dick things into action movies. Like Minority Report is an action film. You guys covered that. It's not an action story. This isn't an action story. He doesn't do Man in the High Castle is people sitting around Juliana Crane reads a book and then pushes somebody off a cliff. The book. That's it. That's all that happens. I mean, I'm not even making that up. That's what happens. And I love that book. I mean, to be fair, it ends weird. It's not finished, but like that's what it is. Juliana Crane reads a book for like 60 pages and then pushes someone off a cliff. The end. And you're like,
maybe she's reading Philip K. Dick and
right,
pushed him
she
off
might
a
have
cliff.
been, but, like just people sitting around, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, and so all of his things are people sitting around. So that's my question for the two of you. So what is it about him? Like Paycheck is a 6-page short story that Ben and Uma turned into that big action movie that is like,
Because
other than the idea. Yeah, why?
the thing
Why
I
do we keep
realized with
picking
this,
him? Yeah.
the thing I realized with this story, as I read it, you know, it's pitchable. He is an absolute pitch machine, because you don't say it's a story about two guys hanging around. You say it's a guy who goes to this memory implant place to have a memory, and they find out that he's actually, or may actually already be an alien spy, and he's going to be linked with this conspiracy, you know, on Mars. We can get Arnold Schwarzenegger to play it. We're in. Yeah, you know, sort of. Oh, it's going to be about memory loss. It's about this. We're going to have Ben Affleck play it. We're in. You know, it's that kind of thing. You've said about the big ideas. Yeah, they are the big. It's high. It's that sort of like what do they call it? It's an elevator pitch. You just take a Philip K. Dick story, boil it down to its key idea, and then just attach a celebrity. You know, attach someone of note to it at the time. A detective tracks down six replicant robots. It's going to be it'll look like a noir sort of futuristic detective story. Harrison Ford's going to be in it. We're in. You know, it's that's what it is. It's not about the density of the stories, because that's for the Dick fans. But from an executive producer's point of view, like, he is gold, because you can just say, this is the idea. This is, go turn this into an action piece, which is quite simple. Get me a big name.
Well, and the other thing is Hollywood loves the twist of everything you know is wrong.
Yeah.
You know, you think it's reality, but isn't it? I mean, think of how, like, after The Matrix, like, any pitch like that was accepted in Hollywood. But, you know, that's true. You know, it's true Blade Runner. It's true to a lesser degree of The Man in the High Castle. You know, what is the real world that's framing, writing the other one. And, you know, here, obviously, it has to do with memories. But, you know, so, and I think Hollywood loves those stories, you know, like you say, add guns, add a handsome face, add 3 breasts, you know, and you're done. It writes itself. I think that actually is a mathematical formula on some.
That's called the Hollywood algorithm, they call it.
You know, but the other thing that strikes me about this is that I'm always aware, reading Philip K. Dick, that he is mentally ill. And partially that's because I'm mentally ill, but, you know, I'm very palpably aware that he's mentally ill. And so what goes along with this, like, idea that we're all really, like, disgusting, petty people in private is, like, we're all paranoid. You know, like, Philip K. Dick is obviously, like, a paranoid, unwell person, right?
You know,
and
that's
it
so
comes
true.
out.
Oh my God, you're so
because
right.
Because the whole thing about the miniature aliens, it's just to finish, Scott is right that it's like, I want to see that, you know, that thing, you know, I can imagine it. I can imagine it as a comic. I'm imagining it as a movie. But what I'm feeling is like, I'm secretly the most important man in the world.
Yes.
I secretly saved the, and it's not like, you know, Michael Bay's Transformers, where it's like, I'm not getting the recognition I deserved. It's like, I go to work at the post office, but secretly the world revolves around me, don't you know?
Well, that's even the line, isn't it?
Oh my God. But you know what's funny? As Julian's talking, not funny, but true. And I mean, I'm not making fun of mental illness as someone who has it as well. What I'm saying is, Julian, you know what's right on there? The one movie of his that totally bombed, that had an A cast, that was just people sitting around being paranoid, fucking Scanner Darkly. Which is, I love that film. That is maybe like I love Total Recall is probably my favorite Philip K. Dick adaptation. Like, I love that, like, as a movie. But like, Scanner Darkly is so the book, and they're like, and I still don't even know how they gave Linklater that money. He's probably like, because like you said, I got a cast. You nailed it, Scott. They're like, he pitched it. He's like, listen, Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, Woody Harrelson, Robert Downey Jr., we're going to animate them and make them squiggly, and they're all going to be paranoid drug addicts, which 3 of the 4 of them already are. Okay, go. And that was it. And like the fact that Keanu has to play the straight man in that, but it's like but you're right, they totally leans into the paranoia, and that is the most straight Philip K. Dick movie adaptation there is, and very unsuccessful. Like everybody forgets that movie exists, but I love it, and it's exactly what you said. It captures it so well. And so probably they were like, oh, we made that and that bombed. What's the next one we're going to do? Nicolas Cage next. Okay, cool. Let's do that one instead, because that makes no sense and is bananas and stupid and actiony again, because 4 paranoid people sitting around talking didn't do very well. You nailed it. Julian, you're in charge of Hollywood now.
Yeah, that's what, but you're right. I think that's what it is. But when you say Nicolas Cage, I'm pretty sure Nicolas Cage just sits with like a book of like stacks and stacks of anthology books around, and he'll be just picking up a Philip K. Dick one and be like, that one, and then goes off and offers it and be like, don't worry, I've got to get paid to pay my taxes. I want to just make a point that one of the lines we talked about, you say about the paranoid, but also sort of like how people see this. This is when they talk about him being the child that stopped the alien invasion. This has nothing to do with the Mars or Interplan, single-handedly stopping an invasion of Earth from another star system. He shook his head at that. Wow, what a kid dreams up, and by pious virtue too, not by force. So it's this idea of like, he did it through good means. It's sort of quaint. He dabbed his forehead with a large linen pocket handkerchief. Nobody said anything. In fact, McLean said, it's touching, but arrogant, the police official said starkly, inasmuch as when he dies, the invasion will resume. No wonder he doesn't recall it. It's the most grandiose fantasy I ever ran across. So I love the fact the police are like, these people in the memory business are like, this is a cool idea. I love it. Why wouldn't you do this? It's a great concept. But the police are going, no, he's clearly a sort of delusional psychopath. This guy is a real problem. So yeah, I think it is quite interesting how people sort of like same fantasy, different perspectives on the same thing, but that paranoia is definitely there. Yes,
you nailed it. Julian nailed it. That's the answer. But you're right. That's what it is that Dick, gives us the paranoia and the isolation, and the movies are like, yeah. We don't want that. I mean, they can dabble. Schwarzenegger, Farrell, Tom Cruise, fill in the blank, whichever Philip K. Dick action or Nick Cage. They can be confused and they can make a confused face, but they're fine at the end, right? And
for the most part, yeah.
I mean, fine at the end, meaning like they're vindicated or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're not crazy. Like they almost like the film versions are an indictment on Dick, where you're saying, Julian, like the stories are his therapy. Like you can relate because you're like, feel you, brother. Right?
Yeah. I often think that not just Hollywood, but a lot of fiction is basically taking some delusion, some really ugly mental illness idea, and glossing it up and giving it leather trench coats and, slow-mo Zack Snyder gloss. I mean, if you think about even like Agatha Christie, it's like they all work together and did the murder. Like that's a paranoid, crazy. Like in real life, it's not this Baroque.
I'm trapped on this train with a whole bunch of manipulative murderers.
Right.
Amazing.
It's like, think about The Matrix. Like it inspired school shootings and stuff. Like and people killing their mom. Like these are kind of damaging ideas. But we dress them up, and I think that Dick kind of like half dresses them up. He sort of does his best to dress them up. But Hollywood, what Hollywood really should do is just go to mental institutions, hear crazy shit, and then say, "There's a screenwriter, build a world around this, right? Build a coherent plot around this." And I think that's kind of what they end up doing with Dick, mostly, except for Scanner Darkly. Yeah,
which again bombed. Right? I mean, and it's fucking cool. I love that movie. I think it's beautiful. I'm a Linklater. I'm a stand for Linklater anyway. Like, it's the fact that, but I think they all had a ball. You could tell.
It's an interesting film. Julie and I have talked about getting to Scanner Darkly. I think we have varying opinions on that. But you're right.
Okay. Well,
but
I don't
Phil,
want to jump that. I don't. You guys,
no,
I
no,
can't wait for that to come on Stories in Time Space coming
no,
soon.
but it is
I
interesting.
don't
As you say.
understand any movie where somebody doesn't have a gun put to their head. I
Oh,
need people
sorry.
shot in the torso, or I'm not watching.
You're
Okay?
not watching, especially with Keanu Reeves in it, right?
I do think, we do Hollywood again. Just to, so about to say about this kind of narrative, and also where again it's not so much. We're going to talk about, and we'll quickly jump onto like the heroic fantasization of these things. But when they do take something similar and take it down a narrative, and they have a sort of like a non-heroic protagonist, or it's going to be questionable or grey. I mean, not just this. We've obviously talked about Videodrome, where it's very much the same sort of thing. But he's like, no, that's not a nice set of people. Like, and it didn't do particularly well because it makes people feel uncomfortable. You sort of go, oh, but it's James Woods. He's a celebrity, like he's a star at that point. Like we know who he is. You go watch it and you go, oh shit, this isn't.
Oh
this,
shit.
yeah, this film is insane. And the same with like starting his sort of still relatively early in his career, but like what's it? Johnny Depp leaving Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Everyone says, "Oh, Johnny Depp's doing a film," and then they watch it and go like, "Oh no, this is a drug-addled, insane Terry Gilliam movie," and I don't know what to make of it. Like, it's not packaged in the right way for certain like the mainstream, and all of a sudden, sort of like people go, "Oh, I don't like that," and you go, "Well, you do. You're just not ready for this version of it." I think sort of you like the happy, clappy sort of version. So on that note, let us traverse to the late 80s and early 90s.
Where are we going to go, Scott? You
So-
have the best Arnie of the three of us.
Yeah.
You should tell everybody where we're going.
Well, I am going to get my ass to Mars. I wanted to. This came about for two reasons. Arnold Schwarzenegger saw Paul Verhoeven at a golf resort,
That
and
checks
actually,
out.
and basically walked across and said, like, I really want to work with you. I've seen RoboCop; it's amazing. And so they were sort of really big fans of each other, and so we're like, cool, we've got to work together, make this happen. So they were sort of apparently sort of in the background. Their sort of people were looking for things that these two could work together on. And this version of Total Recall, that wasn't called that originally, it was being just touted as, we can run it for you wholesale at one point. And it was a much more intellectual version. It was going to be more of a straight drama and it's sort of like conspiracy film and that sort of thing. And then Mario Casar, the producer at Carolco, got hold of it and was like, no, this isn't what this film is. This is an amazing story. And he gave it to, I forget the name's guy. I've got his name's in here. Huffer, something. I have to find. He basically gave it to him. They went away, rewrote it, and came back with the version. And then it was handed around to several people in Hollywood, as they usually are. Ronald Shusett, that's it. He was the guy that was sort of handed to. And it was handed around Hollywood for usual people. Names were associated with it. The ones that were making a big sort of thing. Kurt Russell was associated with it at one point, and other little people. And then Arnold sort of heard it and was like, "No, that's mine. This is for me and Verhoeven." And instantly, like that was it. And they're seeing like, well, Arnie can do anything at this point because not only had he sort of established himself as an action hero, an action icon by 1990 or 1989. Twins had now come out and he had proved that he could do comedy with Ivan Reitman and Danny DeVito, and so people were like, "Oh, he can do, he is versatile. He's an actor. He's versatile," and so they were fully supportive. And this was given the green light in seconds, literally when everything came together. Apparently, the only thing I would say is that apparently there's only one time that Verhoeven and Schwarzenegger sort of didn't agree on something, and it was about the level of violence in one scene, where it was about sort of like, again, you said about sort of like being the hero. Verhoeven was very much about the bit where he sort of screw you and he puts it through the side. there was going to be a bit more to that, and sort of I think Schwarzenegger was like, the more it lingers on it, the more it sort of just looks like taking pleasure in hitting someone with the drill. And so they were like, no, that's got to be a lot shorter. So that apparently that was about it. They got on really well. So
Schwarzenegger, you're saying, wait, Schwarzenegger was like, maybe we don't brutally crucify or gut the black guy. And
basically.
then they're like,
and then sort of like linger on
maybe.
it with him going like,
Good idea, Arnold. That was smart of you to
Yeah.
have some social awareness. Yeah.
But yeah, so there we go. So yeah, but in this film, obviously, the bodybuilding. But this was the other thing that's noted in one of the commentaries I was reading up on. They had to make him a construction worker because so in the original version of the story, I think he just worked as an accountant.
He's a desk clerk. Yeah.
Desk clerk, yeah. So they were going to keep all that, but then they were like, how do we account for Arnold's size and definition? So they had to make him a construction worker. And this is the thing that makes me laugh. So they did that to justify his bulk and then just put like random chubby guy next to him.
I know, that doesn't work at all. You're like, wait, you're doing the same job, huh?
Yeah. So things like that. That's why kind of the bits this film I absolutely adore. But yes, generally sort of. So the film plot, Doug Quaid is obsessed. He wants to travel to Mars. He's had this obsession, but there's some trouble on Mars. There is a resistance force trying to go against Cohagen, the governor, or sort of the runner of Mars, who charges them all for air and everything else. So instead of being able to go, he decides to go to recall and get a memory and decides to be a secret agent, but then has a fit in the chair, and it's turned out, it either turns out he was actually a part of the conspiracy, and then has this whole sort of conspiracy fight and goes off to Mars, and eventually finds out that there's alien technology and sort of saves Mars, or he is in an institution and everything that we experience is in his head, and he has been lobotomized by the end of the film. Debate.
Discuss.
First and foremost, then let's go. I asked Julian first. Tony, your thoughts though as a movie. Like, what are your first thoughts on the?
I love it. Listen, this movie knows so what it is, and I too saw RoboCop and was like, what is? I mean, Verhoeven does what Verhoeven does, and I was here for it. And I'm here for it still. I'm here for it then. I love a guy who can give you the thing that you want, give you the silly violence, RoboCop, this, like his perfect, the trilogy of Verhoeven is this, Starship Troopers, and RoboCop, right? To me,
100%.
Those three movies are like like if he only made those three movies, he could have died a hero. And not to say that his other movies are bad, but like he gave us these three perfect movies at the perfect time, where it's like, again, as we were saying, like, is Dick commenting on what Clark and Asimov are doing, whereas Verhoeven is absolutely commenting on what everybody else is doing and giving you that exact same thing. You don't get, Deadpool. You don't get anything that's self-referential without Verhoeven. So the first time I saw it, I didn't know it was going to be that, but I mean, I saw RoboCop, I saw this, and you see it at a different age, as a younger person, as an older person, but even then you get it, you laugh. Like, if you don't laugh at RoboCop, you're missing the point. If you don't giggle at this, if you don't see that Ronnie Cox was like, give me that scene where I'm just going to chew it up. And then when he and Michael Ironside's are on the screen together, they're like, I'm full from eating all this up. And that when you have Arnold Schwarzenegger playing the straight man is amazing. Like, so it's just, I think this is his. I mean, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough because RoboCop is almost perfect too. But again, like, so I just keep them all together. But I just love it so much. I just think it's fun. It knows what it is. I do think Sharon Stone is the weak link, but it's not her fault. She's who she is. Verhoeven likes to work with her. She's one of those people who keeps getting movies because people like her. You know what I mean? Like, there's actors who are like that, so it's fine. I could just gush and turn it into the Chris Farley show. Remember that time? And I won't. So
she is, I have to say, with Sharon Stone, she appears to be one of the only members of the cast that don't get what this film is. Like, she's
the Tara Reid of this.
Yeah, she's kind of like playing it in a certain way.
Different. Yeah.
She's gone, I'm in this amazing sci-fi epic, and everyone else is going like, oh, I'm in this pulpy, badass, incredible thing. But yeah, you're right. Julian, initial thoughts on Verhoeven's Total Recall.
Yeah, I like this too. I love it. I was looking and I realized, I saw this when I was 13.
Oof.
And I was thinking, oh yeah, I watched a lot of. I had already seen RoboCop. Uh, but yeah, I think it starts weaker than it ends up being. I do think that it's a little weak and a little slow at the opening. I think like maybe 20 minutes in, I'm thinking like, this is fine, pulpy stuff, but like, why do I remember it as like a classic? And it gets better.
Mm.
But I would say that we've talked about how action movies and serial killer movies and all this sort of fiction lets us kind of vicariously enjoy sinning, right, without actually doing it, right? Like boy, if I had a machine gun, I'd gun down those Vietnamese villagers like Rambo. It lets us kind of vicariously go out and commit terrible murders while still feeling morally insulated because Hannibal Lecter's the bad guy and the good guys win, right? So, here, Verhoeven, one of the things I love about him is he gives us the sugary, syrupy, disgusting candy that we want, right? And he makes it so sugary and so syrupy that it's like he makes you aware of just like how disgusting it is. But then he also undermines it and sort of like puts his finger in your eye and says like, you enjoy this, don't you? And makes you very aware of the fact that you're enjoying like this sugary version of what you are. And so I think in some ways this is sort of the ultimate version of that because of the fantasy element that it's like, yeah, we all know that what all action movies are doing, all of, sort of, especially action sci-fi, but, fantasy movies, all, is selling us memories, right? Selling us vicarious experience. And, they're romantic and they look awesome and they're super violent. But, it's like, think about all the James Bond movies, right? Every scene's a sex scene, right? It's not about, it's not Jean-Luc Carré, it's not really about espionage. It's really about, I could travel the world, kill people with impunity, and screw every hot girl I wanted, with an unlimited budget, like that sounds awesome. That's what the films are selling, right? But they cloak it in a sense of moral rectitude, right? That lets you sort of feel okay about that almost. And here, it's just making you very painfully aware of your own fantasies and how that plays into cinema and blockbusters. So in terms of the Verhoeven catalog and its place in history, that's a huge part of what I love about this.
Well, I almost think you're right. I think because the one thing this is missing with regards to the rest of those other films in his, let's say, in his thematic trilogy, is the adverts. Because you obviously have those in RoboCop, where they've got the sort of like the family sort of game that's about nuclear war, or the sort of the the SUX 6000 and all those kind of things, and then in Starship Troopers, you're sort of like want to know more, sort of those kind of things. And I love all that sort of stuff. I'm doing my thing. I'm doing my bit. All that sort of stuff. This feels like they realize they can't do that in this film because it's not about the culture. It's not about that sort of thing. There's not a cultural element in the same way. But you're right in the sense that is replaced by there are characters that I feel are just directly talking to the audience when they are saying about sort of like you wanted to be you want to be Hauser, you want to be this. Like they're not talking to Arnie, they are talking to you, saying like, oh, you wish you could go to recall. Like, you would do that if you had the opportunity to have a memory to be Arnold Schwarzenegger sort of thing. Like 100%, that's what is replaced in this film is characters coming in and sort of like, not so much directly, but like out the corner of their eye, looking at the audience and saying like, exactly as you're saying, Julian, like, you want to be doing this, don't you? You want to be going to Mars.
It's
you
true.
dirty,
Funny,
dirty
though,
little monkeys. Yeah.
But the advertising, like Pepsi is in this. And I think it's funny that Fujifilm is one of the big sponsors of this, one of the product placements. I'm like, film, how funny. That's the one thing they totally swung and missed on. Like a lot of the things hit, they were really right on. But this was a big, you had to pay for Arnold, where, you know, I mean, Casper Van Dien, how much did you got him for a nickel and a cup of soup?
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest star in that movie at the time was Doogie, was
Neil Patrick Harris.
Neil Patrick Harris at the time, and he's still coming off TV, you know. And then, like, if you think about RoboCop, Peter Weller, I mean, he, you know, committed to the role and took the ballet and did all the work, but he was Buckaroo Banzai. It wasn't like you had to worry about the name. You had to pay for Arnold. So if you're going to pay for Arnold, you better fucking have Pepsi as in the background. You know, it's like when you think about you guys, when you did Demolition Man, we know the Taco Bell thing was also making fun of it, but it was also like they paid for Demolition Man.
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
right.
well,
So I mean, it was also that too. So I think this is that is why it's missing here, that the Verhoeven universe, like
he can't quite get away with it because of the status.
Because you got to spend the money to get Arnold.
Yeah,
I mean, 65 million was the budget. And this is 1989 when they filmed it. So he got 20 of that, 10. What do you think he got of that?
Arnie,
of the 65, yeah.
No, it was around 10, I think. Around 10
okay,
million.
so but think about that: a $65 million budget, and one person gets 10 million. Yeah. So that means you got 55 million to do the rest.
Yeah.
And again, Ironsides, and again, I'm sure he shows up for like a bag of Coke, but it doesn't matter. Like, you got, and that's an Arnold thing too at this time, you know. And then of course, then he goes on to make his greatest film, Last Action Hero, where he knew what he did and he knew to make fun of himself. So I think that's really a great point, because I even wrote that in my notes. I'm like, oh man, I forgot how much of the advertising was real. Like, this was a product placement film, which, you're right, does take a step back from the other two, but it's still, I just want it to be in the same universe. I'm just going to pretend it is forever, and I will buy that for $1.
Yeah. Well, there are other elements of it where it sort of, there are, how to put it, there's like a saturation in this. This feels like a saturated universe as well. You know, like you said, one of the things I always think about is to describe RoboCop and Starship Troopers is they feel saturated. Like you've got everything within that culture, the advertising, the films, the people, and that sort of thing. So although you haven't got the advertising, you've still got sort of like Johnny Cab is one of my favorite things of all time. And so it's sort of, you know, it's there. I think the design's fantastic. And the fact it's sort of like, you know, hi, welcome to Johnny Cab. And it sort of introduces itself and everything. And there's elements throughout the film, like Recall is this you know, this big thing. Like you say, although there's the sort of product placement advertising, the place itself like feels saturated. Like when you go to Mars, it's separate from Earth. Like it feels like a place. And they have all, you know, it has a different tone, obviously different lighting, but yeah, I think that's one of the things I actually like of Verhoeven. That aside from they feel like a tactile kind of place. It always feels kind of claustrophobic, but it feels like a tactile place. Like, oh no, you could step out and go to, you know, this world, or I could go to that Mars. I don't want to go to that Mars, but like you could go to that Mars, and I think you could do something there, and I just love that about it. So yeah, I always find that sort of with Verhoeven that there's that. The other thing as well is the blood. Let's talk about the violence in this, because you can't have a Verhoeven film without violence, and there are a number of scenes that get talked about. But the most Verhoeven of Verhoeven films, it happens on the escalator or on the stairs. You know, hundreds of squibs or some poor stuntman being used as a body shield. Brilliantly done. It's amazingly silly. It's ridiculous, but
it's a fantasy, you know.
100%. Yeah,
and it is. Look, I will straight up confess, I love violence, and I love, you know, one thing that scene does really well is it doesn't pretend there won't be civilians killed, right? Like we've seen a million movies where like the bad guys are just spraying machine guns everywhere. Here it's like, you know, Verhoeven always does that, where it's like, let's make sure we see like a lady with a baby carriage getting blown into a wall, you know, and you know, just amazing stuff. So, you know, the other thing is the way that even though Arnie was, you know, objected to, you know, to more violence in the drilling scene. It's amazing how, like, he's very likable because he's Arnie, right? But underneath the surface, he's always doing things that are really questionable and really subverting and stuff. I mean, he shooting a woman and saying, "Consider this a divorce."
Yeah.
He punches her. When he is, um, what is it? The comedy where it was MacGruber, where
Mm.
as soon as he's shot at, he grabs his ally and holds it and says, "You use me as a human shield." Arnie literally does that. He
Yeah.
literally just grabs a civilian and uses him as a human shield instinctively, right? Like, he's constantly doing really morally questionable things, and enjoying the violence. And so I really like that aspect. Like, he knows you're enjoying the violence, but in a weird way, like, that violence is both super cartoony and also more realistic in the sense that, like, civilians are getting killed, right? This is
Mm.
not Man of Steel's finale where, it's hiding that fact, glossing over. I mean, for Hope, it's like, oh no, I'm going to show them, like every bullet ripping through Mama, you know. So in a weird way, it's like more abstract and more heightened, but also more realistic. But at the same time, it undermines the hero, and yet you never feel that because it's Arnie or because it's so glossy and
Well,
heightened. Bugs Bunny.
yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think like Looney Tunes is that kind of thing, isn't it? So it's sort of like, I think Arnold by this point had built up enough goodwill that, like you say, he could do this stuff in a film, and everyone would be like, "It's Arnie being Arnie," kind of thing. This is what you expect from an Arnie film. But I also think there's an element of when that number of that when that amount when he grabs that person, and I'm just flicking through the pictures on IMDb, sort of like that's it. So when he grabs that guy as a human shield, at first you are like, "Oh my god." But then it's a bit it's the same as the Ed 209 scene in RoboCop, isn't it? At first you're shocked, and then you're sort of like, oh, it's still going, and this is kind of ridiculous, and it's kind of then it's sort of funny because everyone's sort of like, oh my god. Um, it's the same. This is the equivalent for this to me. Is that sort of like, because he not only does he hold him once, he literally turns round on the stairs and uses him to defend him front and back. And so it's that thing of like, it starts off shocking and just slowly you realize like, oh, this is a skit, this is a joke, oh, it's hilarious.
It is hysterical. It's brilliant. I mean, and here's why it works. Here's the answer. The little girl, the little psychic girl, the mutant girl, he's nice to her and he pulls a quarter out of her ear. That's it. You forgive everything. The whole movie is forgiven. Shooting Sharon Stone, all the things, all the people who must have died at the airport, right? When get ready go for a ride, boom, and the lady blows up. All of the cops who are just literally showing up and doing their job, they're all dead. It's all fine because he's nice to that little girl. That's the moment. That's what it is. That scene.
Well, also he saves Mars. If you're accepting that this isn't a true story,
sure.
He's actually he's the savior of the resistance. That's the thing, isn't it?
Right, but the resistance is full of those people, right? Yes. The resistance is full of, they call the mutants in here, but that's who the resistance is. And so, but like there's that, and you're right, but like that is the end. That's the hero's ending. And so and I know that is the end, but it's almost more abstract than that touching moment where he just instinctively, the Doug Quaid character instinctively is like, oh, she's so cute, are all psychics this, and here's some exposition, good job, we need that, because there's that line that they sort of use and then they get away from and they come back to, that maybe Doug is psychic.
He does, and I know exactly what you're saying. The thing is, and this is the thing with Verhoeven, we're saying about sort of Dick sort of pulling the rug and changing facts and stuff. So he's walking there, he's got Benny, who's the taxi driver, from Mars. And he says, he's kind to that little girl. She says, I can guess you're a tourist. And he says, how did you know? And then it gives her the dollar or whatever. But then he turns to Benny and says, are all psychics? And like Benny cuts in and goes, freaks? And Arnie just agrees with him and goes, yeah. So you say he's being nice, but the moment she's gone, he's like, fucking hell, she's a right uggo, isn't she? Like, he's literally called, like, they refer to as freak. So there is that thing of like, give with one hand, slightly take away with another, which feels very Verhoeven, where he's like,
very Verhoeven. That is what will be written on his gravestone.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you the complete out. Like, you know what I mean? It's sort of,
Well, as Julian was saying, it's complicated. Really should be what's written there. It's like Paul Verhoeven. It's complicated.
Yeah.
Is Basic Instinct really what you think it is, or is that also a brilliant work of satire? I think it's B, but you forget because of the one scene. Is Showgirls as bad as you think it is, or did he pick her, Elizabeth? I can't think of her last name right now, on purpose to make you uncomfortable.
Elizabeth Berkley.
Elizabeth Berkley. Yeah, he always knows exactly what he's doing. It's complicated. That's what's brilliant about him. He gives you the thing.
Maybe that's what we want. I want
is.
to do a Hollywood Verhoeven retrospective just called "It's Complicated."
It's complicated. Paul Verhoeven. Sorry, you're uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
Did you, Paul Verhoeven? Did you really like Showgirls, and you're afraid to admit it? That's what that. Like, you know, it's like
that's the bit it gets to. Yeah, that's the ultimate question. The other thing as well is, like you say about this, not just with the violence, but with all the bits and pieces. It gives you iconic moments. This film, doesn't it? It gives you not so much fist pumping moments, but like, oh man, that's ace. Like, everyone remembers like Get Your Ass to Mars. Everyone remembers sort of the meet see you at the party, Richter, and his arms get ripped off and all this thing. But even going back, like Arnie's head coming undone, dong 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 dong. When he's dressed as the sort of how many head special effect doubles does this have of Arnie? There's at least 2, but 3. Sorry, there's at least 3.
Well, they probably could use the one from the opening dream and the one at the end on Mars twice, right? Yeah,
I'm assuming that's the case. Yeah. But like the amount of stuff at times they do a version of his head. But it's great. Like, they've got that, donk, 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 and it comes apart. And like you say, throws it, get ready for a surprise. And then the massive explosion. This is just full of visuals where you're going like, oh my God, that's incredible. The X-ray that it introduces at the start, and then you've got, then gets used for an action set piece where you've got like people running at Arnie in sort of skeletal form and all this. Like, it's just so visually impressive throughout without being a blockbuster. It's sort of like it's a Hollywood blockbuster, but without being what it is today. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like it knows to sort of have a wink and a smile about it. And it knows what it is. And I think that's why it's so joyful.
That whole sort of like security scan thing, that was a big deal at the time. And I remember like that got written up in the trade presses and stuff. I mean, that was really impressive that they had animated that. And of course, there's no reason for Arnold to really jump through that window except to shift back into live action. But okay. But you're right, Scott. And the other thing that I think about in terms of that is how the dialogue is also really good. And okay, so the party Richter thing it doesn't really work for me, but there are tons of classic lines. And just lines that drive home some of that Philip K. Dick stuff better than Philip K. Dick does sometimes. I love the psychic saying, want to know your future, and he says, what about the past? And it's just a throwaway line, but it's like, oh yeah, we're all, like my brain just goes, oh yeah, we're all trying to figure out our past and our identity. And like, it's just, and it's a clever little line, but there are so many lines like that just keep that patter going. And the pacing also contributes to this effect that, especially once it gets going, it is like one action scene after another. The characters stop to talk, and it's like, we've got to limit this to 30 seconds, before something else happens, And so if you ever have any objection to the logic of something, or, like some acting or some bad dialogue, or, like, why does, where did I find myself thinking, like, where did the explosives fit in that head that came apart? Why would you make
where did he get it from? Where did he get it? Where did he get it from? Yeah.
And why would you program it to deliver this, sardonic line? Like, that's not a thing that explosives experts specialize in. But, but if you ever have any of these thoughts, you say, it doesn't matter, right? Because instantly you're just swept off into the next bit of dialogue, the next bit of action, the next set piece. And so I think the pacing really contributes to that too.
It does. It's relentless. And it's and I know when we'll make the switch in a little bit to the remake, that gets in its way. Like the relentless nature of that one actually gets in its way, where this one, because it's working and because And because it does the thing that Scott and I, when we talked about They Live, that John Carpenter painful almost 30-minute first act but was so necessary, right? I mean, I love They Live because, and we talked about it. Whereas this does, I mean, it's not as slow the first 30 minutes, but it's definitely, it's Verhoeven's like, I'll give you 15. I'll give you a 15-minute first act, whatever. But but he does world build and he does give us something. And I think that's really important too, to that what you guys are talking about, the pacing works. And the reason that it does, and what Julian is so right about, is that it didn't, the book, the short story, He Dreamt of Mars. We start with Mars. We start with this quick Mars thing, and there's a bit of an action. He wakes up from a dream, and then but then it's just like domestic-y stuff, right? And he gets a shag with Sharon Stone, and then he goes to work, and his schlubby friend is like, let me tell you all about it. I'm Mr. Exposition here. I'm here to tell you about whatever. Yeah, great. But it works because it's slow. We need to understand why Schwarzenegger looks like he does. We need to understand all this. So it does it. It doesn't choose to hit the ground running. And so that when the action scenes happen, they are fast and furious and all the things that Verhoeven does. But I do think that first act did the work, right? He's still giving you the world building. And so and again, he wants you to keep moving, because once the ideas happen, he's like, right, because there's such bullshit. Listen, him jumping through the thing, even this time when I watched it, I was like, that is so fucking cool. There's nothing else I can say. I mean, did I this time say, like, why is the only thing we can see is the gun? He has no belt on. There's no metal in his boots. I mean, he's a construction worker. There's metal in his boots. Like, I know what that looks like. Don't pay no attention.
Yeah.
It means nothing, because it's so cool. And Verhoeven knew it. Like, I almost feel like that was intentional too. That is the thing that Verhoeven does, is like this stuff like that. Who makes a bomb with a talking mask, and where did that come from? Doesn't matter. He knows it's stupid, but so he just does it though. And that's, so I mean, I feel like some of the things, like a bad filmmaker, that would be an accident in the plot, but a Verhoeven film, you're like, that's on purpose for you to sit and talk about later. The joke that I just did in front of you, that you watch and were like, oh my God, like you said, Julian, you're like, wait, if I start doing the math, that doesn't add up. But you're like, oh, that's so cool. Talking blowy up head lady, she's cool. And the fact that, like, you mentioned Looney Tunes earlier, Julian, the clothes changing, like it's not quite Tinkero level of costume change, but like, where are they getting all the clothes?
Yeah.
Like, exit stage left. Now I'm not in the dress anymore. When does he get out of the dress?
Yeah. Well,
doesn't matter.
It doesn't, and that's the thing. You're not supposed to question it. There's nothing in this film to question. But what I would say is, just 2 points I want to sort of add or just move on to. The other thing as well that sort of makes this all work is it looks good. Like, throughout, I think the special effects are great. You know, the reason I like Johnny Cab is because it looks ace. But even going up to, like, just because it looks grimy, it looks daft, it looks silly, but it looks like it works. But the I think going up to sort of the sidekicks on Mars, Quato as the sort of thing when it comes out, like, it's because it's physical effects, because it's obviously done through puppetry and all that kind of thing. Like, I'm digging it, and I'm all in for it. So I think this film's still, so I watched it in 4K, and it's obviously been cleaned up, and it looks great. Like, it looks, you know, a lot of these films from this era, sometimes when you have like back mapping and all that sort of stuff, you can see it and you go like, oof, like, you know, looks really rough. But no, this looks good, and you can see that some of those effects and stuff are you know, and the sets as well look really good. Right, let's settle a debate then, very, very quickly before we get to the last one. For Verhoeven, does Doug Quaid in this get his ass to Mars, or is he in a chair suffering a psychotic embolism, or whatever other thing, a psychotic episode in a chair? I'll go around the room, and then I just want to quickly hear quick sort of like a summary of the evidence you've got to sort of present. So, Julian,
I've got to go first.
you do.
No, I think in some ways this does that sort of Schrodinger's cat sort of signifier thing where you can see it both ways. And at the watching it this time, I thought, oh, it's really clear this is you know, this is all a hallucination, right? This is all and I still think that's the more convincing case. For one thing, for one thing, you have the shots in the in Recall of the brunette that he picks. Is clearly the same actress, right? How would you possibly explain that? You have the shot that it doesn't seem exactly right, but it's sort of like a matte painting of the alien technology on Mars with sort of hovering
Oh, it's like a
over.
production design photo. It's like a production design
Yeah,
picture, isn't it? Yeah.
and you can kind of say like, well, maybe that was released to the press as like a of the alien stuff they found, but that's not really very convincing, right? I don't know how to explain that.
Mhm.
And but in terms of the argument against, one of the things that comes to mind is, how is he imagining all of these scenes that he's not in?
Yes, that's my
Like,
biggest thing.
like, so in some ways I find myself wondering, like, does it really work both ways, Julian, or does it really not work both ways, Julian? But for
Yeah.
me, I come down on the side of like, it's a better movie if it's all a fantasy that ends with a sweeping kiss and the Disney jungle fun of it
Mhm.
all. And so for me, that selling the romance of James Bond, of the action thing, is part of it. And I think I come down on, yeah, it's a hallucination.
Mm.
That makes a little more sense, but I'm not sure that either of them totally makes sense.
No.
But I'd
Okay,
love to hear
yeah.
what you guys think.
Tony, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
no, I would, and I don't love the whole thing was a dream as a plot device, but because it starts with a dream and it ends with that almost mirrored scene. I've never, I mean, if my choices are just the two, then he's definitely having a psychotic break. But it still could be that this is his dream, this is his fantasy, this is his. And the thing, as somebody who's part of my issues is I loop a little, and you get stuck in a spiral a little when you're like in your head. You're like, well, then there's this, and then there's this, and you're like, well, this is stupid, and then you start rationalizing the thought, and then you come back to the beginning because you haven't actually resolved that thing, and just like bitching about the other stuff. The loop gets you in the loop. So to me, that leads me to believe it's all. But I mean, I want it. But this is the thing. It's not real, but I 100% want it to be real. I want it to be real for Doug. I want it to be real. I want this world to exist. I don't know that anything that happens. I mean, I don't think that any of it is real. Like, I believe that Melina is probably like his nurse, right? Sharon Stone may be one of like the evil like Nurse Ratchet character. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
so you don't even believe the opening of the film is real.
it's all in his head.
It's
Yeah, it's
all in his
all
head.
yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, that's an interesting take. Because I think, to me, I think, like you say, there's evidence like laid throughout. We talked about the Agatha Christie sort of thing for the, we were talking about the book. Like one of the during that sort of the golden age of detectives, they wrote 10 rules of writing detective fiction, and one of them was like, you can't lay out clues and then have the actual perpetrator be someone never mentioned in the book. Like, you can't just go surprise character. Like, the person, you have to be able to work it out throughout the sort of the story for the most part. And I feel what this does is exactly as you said, Julian. It lays out clues, and I even feel like actors are given direction to give you hints both ways. In the opening scene when he gets up, like the reaction of his mate, the other driller, when he talks him out of going to recall, like he gives him a second suspicious look, and you're like, oh, he knows more than he's letting on. Like Sharon Stone gives him a lingering look as he leaves for work, and you're like, that's not a loving look, that's a suspicious look. Like there's things like that throughout the opening that you go, oh, that when you watch it back, knowing where it's going to go, you go, oh, those feel like clues to this. The Melina thing, she was in his dream. So I read it this time. I was like, he's literally losing consciousness as he's seeing that character. Like, that's not what's on the screen. That's what he's putting in his head, and that's how he's interpreting whatever 3D image they've got on the screen. Things like that. So I'm going like, there's that evidence you could say, oh, this is all real. This is the James Bond fantasy, you say that, like, but then straight away, you're right. There are other things where you sort of say, well, it mirrors exactly the beginning and the end will mirror each other. It's such a ridiculous thing. There are also like throughout the opening scene, you get to meet Cohagen. You get to sort of like this whole thing about the resistance is laid out in the news. All these things are laid out, which go, oh, that all feeds into this fantasy later on. So it wonderfully plays with you. And as a kid, when I sort of watched this too young, didn't care. But I was like, Arnie's blowing shit up and I love it all, kind of sort of stuff. But you do watch it now, and I'm like, actually, this film, I think gets considered this is considered an Arnie film. But no, this is a Verhoeven film, and I think it's a very good Verhoeven film. For the fact I could watch this and go, oh, actually, if I can lay out a case for it being a full James Bond ripping adventure, or I can lay out a full case for this being a full fantasy, and actually, all those scenes that he's not involved in, he's just forming a narrative in his head to fulfill the full adventure. Like, he's literally we talked before about you said about every sort of writing a story or writing, it's like fulfilling your dark sort of part of your mental illness, or trying to resolve something, mental illness. That may well be it. Doug Quaid is sat in a home somewhere, only weighing 90 kilograms in a chair, but's writing this version out of himself of saying like, no, 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 I used to be able to bench press 300 pounds and I did this, and you won't believe what the conspiracy was. It's sort of, so you can make that case as well. So I think, but it weaves together so well that, but it also gives you what you want in the sense of the action and adventure. So like you said, you said before, he's almost like the parent that sort of like, catches you smoking and go, well, you're going to smoke all of them now. You love this, do you? You love it. And then at the same time, it's going to go, but whilst you're doing that, I'm going to make you read Philip K. Dick, and you're going to try and determine what's going on in this story. So, yeah, I think this is whether we go what are the best, Philip K. Dick adaptations. This is definitely up there. This is always up there for me with this sort of succeeds where some of the others just don't get it, and they get on the action path. Okay.
Speaking of those clues, can I just say, I was waiting at a bus stop yesterday, and I was talking to the stranger next to me, and he was sort of talking to me about his life, and then I realized he was sweating, and I instantly knew he was a fantasy, so I just pulled out my gun and gunned him down right
Pushed him in front of the
there,
bus.
You just shot him right there.
Yeah, that's the thing I do.
That was the right choice, obviously.
That's right. Well, I mean, it does strike me that is like not a clue at all, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're in a fantasy world, why do you have to go in through the door? Like open the door. Nothing about that makes any sense, positively or negatively.
But we love it anyway.
Yeah.
But
you're right. Yeah. Every time I see a sweaty person at a bus stop, I just want to push him in front of a bus, thinking, "You're not real.
You're not real."
Right, we're going to jump up into the future. I know very little about the reason for this remake, other than a film we've already mentioned, is Minority Report, and also the person that made this film and his wife being in the cast, Kate Beckinsale and Len. I was going to say Len Goodman, then Len Wiseman. Thank you. Yeah, so this comes out.
I want to put Kate Beckinsale in my movie. I mean, she knows what she is.
Oh,
right?
100%.
I mean, okay, but I mean, make a different movie for her. That's all I have to say. It's like, sir, if she's there and available, you could make something else. Like, Noah Baumbach didn't make this when he first got together with Greta Gerwig. They made Frances Ha, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can do something else. You don't have to be like, oh, my wife is an actor and I want to put her in a movie that I want to direct. Well,
the first time they got together, he put her in tight leather corsets and made a vampire film. So
listen, I openly think those movies are amazing, and then they get really terrible, and then they end on a strong note. I've seen them all. Yeah. No, they're awful, but they also know what they are. The Total Recall remake doesn't know what it is.
All right, let's
kill the joy? Why did you kill the joy?
Okay, that's a very good point. So this is something I want to. Let's go. So 2012, this comes out. We are going through. I think we're starting to sort of go through a bit of a resurgence in things. This is the same year as the Avengers. This is the same year as Dark Knight Rising. So it's the sort of the beginning of that real ramp up to superhero sort of like things, and the joy coming back to sort of just doing ridiculous things. This feels like it's about 5 years too late this film does. But yeah, it's come about. It's obviously stars Colin Farrell, Jessica Biel, and Kate Beckinsale mainly. You then get like other people in it that like Bill Nighy and
Cranston.
Bryan Cranston. What's funny about it is when I read people sort of talking about this film now, they all seem to assume that Bryan Cranston was famous in 2012, and you're going like, no, he really wasn't. Like this isn't a Bryan Cranston cameo. This is Bryan Cranston as an actor getting a small part. Like that's it. Like this is before Breaking Bad. This is sort of Malcolm in the Middle kind of territory. Like this isn't a big name get that some people seem to assume it is. Colin Farrell's
On
clearly the
Breaking
star.
Bad, can I just point out that I didn't know until this time that Dean Norris from Breaking Bad, the cop from Breaking Bad, plays Tony the Mutant
Oh
in
yes,
the original Total Recall. The guy with the face that's just like melted on one side. So there's a Breaking Bad connection between these films.
yes.
But the
I
cop
love
is
that.
neatly sequestered in the original, so they're in separate universes, so you can preserve your meth empire.
It's all safe. So yeah, anyway, let's dig into this one. So you've got No More Mars. You've now got an Earthbound story about the United Federation of Britain, I think UFB, and then the colony, which is Australia. The rest of the world is uninhabitable, and there's basically a device that travels through the center of the Earth, flips over,
Which
and
is a
using
Philip K. Dick thing. He invented that in a different story.
He
So
may
again,
have
it's
done.
like,
Still stupid.
he did. He did. No, but that's the thing. Like he did it, and it
Yeah.
exists in the Thursday Next. Jasper Ford uses it as a joke in the Thursday Next books because it's like that book series is making fun. It's using from other literary devices. So like it's a Philip K. Like so, I remember seeing it. I was like, this is in a different Dick story, and I don't actually or still even remember which one it is. So it's like, okay, if you want to tell that, make that one.
Yeah.
Make that story. Put your hot wife in that movie using that technology. What are you doing? No Mars. The opening line is Mars. And this isn't the thing that I'm going to get super angry. Okay, listen. The thing is, you didn't remake. You didn't say, hey, what did they leave out of? You can do it. We can remember it for your wholesale. Let's revisit the source material. This is it says in the credits, this is a remake of Total Recall, which is again also just air quote inspired by a PKD story. So this is inspired by Total Recall, which is inspired by PKD. So the whole Dick thing is gone, but then you still went and borrowed from other Dick stuff, but you're ignoring the Dick. Like if you're going to do it, remake it straight. I would understand that, but it isn't that. It's joyless, and I'm just sad for all of them that they're in it.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm just so sad,
No.
especially watching them back to back again. I didn't rewatch the 1991 when the 2012 one came out. I just watched it kind of with one hand on my nose, but I'm like, I like the people who are in this. I'm going to give it a try. It was sad. But watching them back to back, woof.
There's a couple of things I'm going to, yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Julian. I didn't mean to not let you talk. I was very angry. I'm very upset about making shitty art.
No, I
You've
enjoy
given
your
us-
rants. I love it. All of our rants are our best
Yeah.
moments. And I learned from your rant. I learned never ignore the Dick and always take it straight. That's my takeaway. No, I think this is one of the rare cases of a remake that's better than the original. It is just a masterpiece from start to finish. No, I agree. I agree with everything you said, Tony, about like why would you do this? It's clear it's a remake of the original. The lack of Mars, like you think if you're going to remake the original, right? You say we have better special effects. We can do tons of shit on Mars that they couldn't do in the original. The romance of Mars is so much a part of the original, right? Of what works. Leaving out Mars is just a fatal error, and replacing it with this stupid version of a globe with 2 points and this stupid ball thing that doesn't make sense. And there's cool shots and stuff. It's not a bad idea, but they don't do anything with it. Those robotic synthetic policemen look totally out of the later RoboCop remake. Just sort of like bad generic life designs, you know. But I will say what I'll defend about this movie, and it's not a good movie. I agree with everything you said, Tony. What I will defend about this movie is I want to make a cut of this movie that is just the city scenes of the British colony, which are totally Blade Runner inspired. Again, like, why would you take from this other Dick story? It is so clear. Like, they're like, I mean, we're going to do Blade Runner. We're going to do the Japanese influence. You know, we're going to do this layered kind of city. And that stuff just looks amazing. You know, it just looks, I could watch that stuff all day. I just want to see that. Ignore the characters, ignore the plot, get rid of all of the rest, and just show me characters walking around that landscape. And I'm sold.
I can't disagree. Actually, I think one of the things I think when the chase scenes are like a wide shot, is some of the best bits of this film. Because I am like the level of detail and the effects really work to give you stuff. You're like, oh wow, that looks amazing. There's a great scene where he's being chased. It has sort of like it's obviously in the UK, and they have Big Ben, so he must be in Parliament Square. But then they've got all these like the buildings have had to be built around it and over it and stuff, and it just gives you this idea of scale of the claustrophobia of it all. And I think that stuff all looks really good. But you're right. This film feels weird. You know, you said like there's joy. Because there's like a carnage love of joy of carnage for the original Total Recall. Like it wears its heart on its sleeve. It's very Looney Tunes and it knows what it is. This film feels closer to the Dick story simply because I don't think it doesn't know what it is. You've got like Colin Farrell playing, and I've seen Colin Farrell, like he's a good actor. Like he's done stuff. He can be charming, he can be cheeky, and but then he can do pretty sort of like complex and sort of serious roles, and he can do the action stuff. Like he's not a bad actor. Like he's, I don't think he's ever Oscar worthy, but he's not a bad actor. He's very competent. But he just comes to this and just goes action role. And that sort of sees it. That's it. And I think that the opening scene of this tells you everything you need to know. Like the fact that the dream he has is an action scene and stuff tells you 100% what this film is. And you go, oh, okay, that's what this is focusing on. That's all this focuses on. This film wants to be Minority Report. This film wants to be I, Robot. That's all this film wants to be without having the sort of star power of Tom Cruise or Will Smith. Or the skill of Steven Spielberg. The lens flare in this and the sort of the use of the robot synthetic cops and all this other stuff. Like it's just, and the car chase section is so Minority Report. I was watching thinking like this almost feels like they've just taken some footage from the 2002 film and played it in the background whilst putting new effects on it. Like it feels so similar in places. So there's all that, but then like you say, they've brought in like Beale and Beckinsale and all these other actors. No one's having fun, yet the sort of the fighting they're doing is really impressive. Like the choreography
you
on the
said that at the beginning, Scott. That was it. You said about midway through the movie, you're like, wait, is this good? And you know why you think that? Because Jessica Biel and Kate Beckinsale are excellent action stars.
They are,
and their
100%.
Their fight scenes are the best part of the movie. So midway through, Jessica shows up, and the elevator fight is awesome. That's it. And so you're like, oh man, do I like this? And you're like, oh no, that's just two competent action stars with a good stunt choreographer, and they're not doing the Christopher Nolan cutaway. It's them. You see them fighting. So you're like, oh man, they're great. And they are both really good action stars. We've seen them both do action. And so that's the moment. And I knew it when you're like, about halfway through, I was like, is this good? And then I realized it wasn't, because then that's over.
Well, that's it. I think that you're right. The thing is, Beckinsale's playing a rather miserable looking character in this. So she's throughout, it's kind of miserable. And there should be a bit more joy to what she does. But she is, you're right, she's a legit action star. I think she's very good at what she does. I think she can, she's very competent as a sort of like with the action choreography. However, there's a scene, and this is where like I said something, it popped into my head, and I said something that made me laugh to the extent I had to pause the film, which knew that I was not enjoying the film as much as I thought. So when it's sort of like Farrell's Quaid admits he's been to recall and he's got this thing going on in his head, And then he ends up having a fight with her in the apartment. Yeah. And again, I'm sort of like, okay, fine. And she throws him under the bed, and then she sort of slides across the floor and hits him in the face with her groin. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Out of nowhere, it happens. And I just sort of went, I am the vaginator. And it just came out of my mind. And I sort of like, I made myself laugh. And I was like, oh, there's more fun to be had poking fun at this film and its po-face seriousness than there is in watching this film. And then, but at that point, that's when I was like, I was like,
so
oh,
true.
okay. But then you're right about there are scenes that are well put together, but there's nothing good in the story. There's nothing good in the mystery. And so even when it gets to the end, I'm like, like the stakes in this are rubbish.
I watched the director's cut this time because the director's cut is 15 minutes longer, but it features one of my favorite actors of all time. Ethan Hawke's floating disembodied head is in the director's cut.
Why?
And, he's the guy. He's the voice on the screen who's like, if they ever told you whatever, here's the thing.
Right.
He's the voice. You know. I don't know why he owed somebody a favor, whatever. He showed up and it's Ethan Hawke, so it's good. It didn't help. You know how sometimes you're like, oh, if you watch the director's cut, it's better or worse, like with Blade Runner or whatever. So again, it's like, this didn't help. So it's just 15 minutes sadder. Even Ethan Hawke didn't make it better. Like, you know how Ethan Hawke was having so much fun in Valerian?
Yeah.
Like he's in that for the same amount of time. He's in Valerian for the same amount of time as he's in this. And he's like, you could tell he like begged to be in that movie. He's like, ooh, can I be in Valerian? I'm gonna have all the fun. And he is amazing. And I know, Julian, I know how much you love Valerian. I love that's a great show that you guys did. But like, it's the exact opposite of that. It's the inverse joy of him. It's like he owed somebody a favor, so he showed up and did disembodied head.
Why? Len Wiseman had his children at gunpoint and was like, "You're gonna do
somebody
this."
Somebody was like, "Yeah, right. If you ever want to see Maya again, you gotta show up." And he's like, "All right." Yeah. So anyway, all of that to say, sad trombone.
It is. That's the thing. Sad is probably the best word for this. Like, the thing is, I ended up sort of giving it 3 stars because I felt kind of sorry for it when I'm like, you know what I mean? When I'm like, the action's actually really good. I actually think the car chase is really well choreographed. Like, I'm giving this 3 stars to like the special effects team, the stunt team, the choreography team. I'm giving these stars to say, actually, I could, Julian, you said like if you were to cut out and just have the sort of the city scenes, like again, I'm going like, yeah, the VFX team on this did a fantastic job. But then also, if you were to just cut out and have just some of the fighting, even the scene of Colin Farrell fighting off all the police with recall and stuff, like some of that like reduce some of the lens flare, but some of that is really good. And like I said, the elevator scene and all the fight stuff, brilliant. Just lop out the plot and I'll just watch this as a sort of like a show reel of what's possible. And that's all I want to see. That's the good stuff. Everything else is dreadful.
Yeah, I think you guys have nailed it. Like it wants to be a serious movie of its era, right? And the Minority Report and iRobot influences are there. And it takes itself deadly seriously, and its ideas are not up to snuff, and its acting is not up to snuff, and the plot is not up to snuff. And so it ends up being this sort of half-baked mishmash pile. But I want to say that I like the design of the elevators. I mean I find myself consistent, and I don't know if this is like an Aspergery thing, but like I find myself like I'm watching characters fight and I'm just like, that's an interesting window. Like I'm just constantly watching I'm like, yeah, Kate Beckinsale's fine, but look at what's through that window at the city beyond it. And I just, I'm watching, I'm like, how do these elevators work? Where did they come from? How do they connect? If it explodes above it, does that cause a ripple? Oh no, that line isn't, the rail they're riding isn't, would it not? And I find myself I'm constantly thinking about that stuff. And there's stuff like that doesn't make sense. Like that weird sort of like rectangular window that he slides through and
on the floor.
And like, why do you have a window on the floor? But it at the same time, it's very Blade Runner, and I remember when I saw this at the time, Blade Runner 2049 had come out, and I thought, this is as close as we're going to get to a Blade Runner sequel. Like, it's clear, like, I mean, first of all, I don't know why. I mean, I guess the rest of the world is uninhabitable. I don't know, why, England has been spared and why it's conquered most of Europe. I don't know any of
Ecological
that.
disaster. It literally in the sort of an intro line, it's like the world is uninhabitable because of ecological disaster, and then carry on.
So that is like a 12-year-old boy. This is a 12-year-old boy wrote. It was like, it would be cool. And what if? And and that's really true. Part of my James Gunn problem is I always feel like all the women in James Gunn movies are written by what 12-year-old boys think adult women talk. That's like James Gunn can't write female dialogue. I'm not a big James Gunn fan. Like, I think the second Guardians suffered because the original Guardians was written by a woman and he came in and added jokes, and then he wrote the whole second Guardian, and like the whole relationship between the sisters is lost. And it's like, he's like, I can envision him with like two female action figures, like a Gamora and Nebula action figure. And he's like, and then we fought and we were pretty. And that's what girls say to each other, girls. And this feels very much that way. The elevator fight scene is really good. There's a lot of good, but yeah, there's, like you said, there's like, it'd be cool. Let's make this happen. And again, what Verhoeven, I think, purposefully does the things that are stupid, like the X-ray thing. Like, wait, wouldn't he had steel toes in his boots, so we would see that, but we don't, because he's like, haha, I'm messing with your head. Like, it's intentional. Where this is this is a bad film made by a fine action director. Like, this guy's a good. You know how we always say, like, you talked about Zack Snyder. He's like the world's greatest cinematographer who also just happens to make films. Like, I love to, like, I think he's a great cinematographer. Maybe not the best director. This guy knows how to shoot an action film. He can set it up. He may be a good DP. Maybe he shouldn't be the director. Maybe he shouldn't be in charge, because there's somebody else needed to be like, well, Wes, what if? Because the reason the Underworld movies all work, because you're like werewolves and vampires, and they're all sexy. You're like, cool.
I love the way you say they work. The reason they work.
Well, the reason they work is because you don't care. There's nothing.
Yeah.
They don't have to be anything different than they are.
They know what they are. They pretty much know what they are.
Right, and this. Don't call it Total Recall. Don't remake Total Recall. You even use her name is Kristen in the story, but they used Lori as the name.
Yes.
You used
and Quaid.
Like you did, and Quaid. You could. It just. And again, I don't look. You make art, and people love this. There's a review on the DVD that somebody actually is a liar, and it says, although it just says it was from MySpace, so that tells you that it's not thing. It says better than the original. Andrew Freund from MySpace. It's the review is somebody from MySpace.
What you don't realize is that's been clipped from a sentence that sort of said some arsehole said this was better than the original.
Totally true. Totally true. But Access Hollywood says it's smart, sexy, and action packed. Sexy and action packed. I'll give you that.
I think the thing is, you say about the whole thing, all this is, because we're talking about the action, we're talking about the visuals, right? The moment again, you realize this doesn't work every time it slows down. Every time this slows down to try and have some character interaction, it does not work. Like, it feels really clunky. The drinking scene between Doug and his friend Harry and all that sort of feels really sort of clunky. And then later on, even some of the sort of like emotional stuff between Doug and Melina, and then more than anything, the moment he makes it to the Resistance and you meet the Resistance leader played by Bill Nighy, and Bill Nighy sort of steps out of the shadows, and it's supposed to be some sort of like big reveal, and I'm sort of going like, oh, this is going to be this is going to be some sort of reveal. He's actually going to be a mutant or something like that, and you're like, no, it's just Bill Nighy. And you're like, all right, cool. All right. Well, you've set this up to be something special. It's just Bill Nighy. I'm kind of cool with that.
It's him.
But like,
again, who did he owe a favor to? Because even he, like he can do villain and twisty and have fun. He's not even having fun.
No, this is it. So this film, every time it slows down, just literally slows to a crawl. And it's like, and then it tries to build up to a big finale in this sort of elevator. And that is one of the worst, dullest finales. After everything that's gone on, I'm like, is this still going? Oh my God, like, let this end. So, yeah, this is...
Yeah, and what are the stakes? A stupid invasion a cockamamie plan. Why are you leading the invasion yourself? It's one of these finales, like, a lot of superhero finales where you're just like, okay, I know who's gonna win. Just tell me what the takeaway is and
Yeah.
show me what you're gonna show me, right? Just get this over with.
Yeah.
But I'll say further, like, what you were saying about Bill Nye, like, there are a lot of moments like that in this where it's almost like the typical problem with sequels and remakes is they try to one up the original, right?
Mm.
Like, we got to escalate it, and sometimes that works, and usually it doesn't, right? And people say, it does usually doesn't work. This tries to, in a weird way, it tries to uh to aim lower consistently, right? Like, did you think that the mutant leader of the resistance was fun and interesting? We've got a guy, we are going to deny you that enjoyment.
Yeah.
And it sort of consistently does that in this weird way. And Scott, you said it sort of slows to a crawl whenever characters talk, and that's true. But that dialogue is also like a pale imitation of the original dialogue. And I would say even a lot of the action stuff is, it's okay. But when the in the elevator stuff, that a robot gets his arms cut off, and you're like, in the elevator, and you're like, oh, okay, that's the finale from the original, except it's a robot, it's stripped of its blood, it's stripped, so again, it's like we're going to sort of reference the original but deliberately take away all of your joy and excitement from it. And I'd say even a lot of the action sequences are sort of not that great to me, sort of kind of boring. The conversation when he returns home and he says, I killed some guys, again, the dialogue is bad. It's not as good as the original. But there's an action scene, just like the original. There's an action scene, and then you have the exposition sort of dialogue. And then you've got to have another action scene because she's going to be pursuing him through the whole movie. So it's like action scene, dialogue, action scene continues in this really clunky way. And to me, neither the dialogue nor those action scenes work. So that's not a great endorsement.
You know what you just said, Julian, and so I just looked. This is PG-13.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. If you talked about shooting lower, well, you can't one up one of the bloodiest, most ridiculous scenes. Make it PG-13. They still do the 3 boob scene, but it's because they get away with it because it's not real boobs. It's alien. It's so that's what it is. You went PG-13. And so therefore you went lower, and that's why it's got to be the robots. I mean, there's a fight scene where Colin Farrell gets into a fist fight with a robot, and this isn't like talk about a guy who's also been adapted very well, sometimes very poorly, Richard Matheson, like Hugh Jackman's Real Steel, where it's actually robots fighting, but they have him be the avatar for the robot, so it's very exciting and it's shot well and all of that. And I mean, that whatever.
We literally talked about the Twilight Ozone episode of that the other day. So
right, Richard Matheson is, again, sometimes you get him right, sometimes you get him way wrong, but like when you got robots fight, but it's like literally. Like he's punching a robot. Well, you can't. That's dumb. That's a robot. It's not a guy in a suit. You're not fighting a stormtrooper. That was like I remember sitting there watching that scene this time while Jessica Biel's trying to reload or whatever, and it's like this is so dumb. But
not in a fun way. Not in a dumb, like in a fun way. When I'm watching the original, and you're going like you say, you're watching. Arnold Schwarzenegger's eyes get sucked out on the surface of Mars, and you're going, "This is dumb," but you're going,
"Face melts." Right, that's amazing. Yeah,
or like him pulling the thing out of his nose, or Ronnie Cox going off on some rant. Like, you go, "Yeah, this is dumb, but it's fun. Like, there's a joy to this." The one thing I would say, just as I'm going to finish this off on this point. One of the things is this tries to homage a number of things. So you can tell its influences on Minority Report and iRobot and everything else. There's a scene in this very much where he's got to get from the colony to the UFB, and he's got to get through customs, and there is a woman walking through wearing a yellow top and an orange scarf and has orange hair, and she's sort of a middle-aged woman. And obviously it's a joke because you're supposed to be following her. Now this is a double joke because if you've watched the film, the original, you're following her, and they go, "Oh, it's the person behind him." All that does to me is, even though I've just watched it, the original, is go, "Yeah, that's a much better film, isn't it?" That's all it does. It just reminds you, this would be so funny if that was ripped off and you found that actually was Colin Farrell under that. Like, that would be much funnier. Like, yeah, but it's not. It's another thing. It's a hollow mask, and it's as Julian, as you said, it's lesser. Everything is lesser, and because of that, it's a real sort of miss. Right. Any final thoughts then for anything Total Recall?
This just shows how much we like each other that we all agreed to rewatch Total Recall 2012.
Yes. Yeah, never
Well,
again. I think we've done
we
it.
definitely like each other. I will add, the one thing I will add is my vagina is a weapon, and that is the most female empowering scene I have ever seen. Because you know somebody said that, right? Like, dude, like literally her vagina is a weapon. Like, this is girl power, man.
The vaginator, telling you.
The vaginator. Love it. Oh my God.
Right. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And guys, thank you very much for joining us on this. This has been a blast of a story time. So I'll quickly run around. Tony, you got to drop off. Where can people find you and all your stuff?
arfarina.com, one-stop shop. You can get my novel. You can get some short stories. You can get, if I move my head, what's that? Is that a copy of a book that Scott Weatherly edited that I'm in, that Julian put out? Look at that. And it all comes together right there on my desk. Waxing and Waning, a book about Moon Knight that I'm in. So you could get that there. There's a link there, and you should definitely pick that up. That's the way to get hold of me. arfarina.com. Buy that book. It'll make all three of us happy.
It was. Most indeed. Thank you very much, Tony. Julian, where can people find you and all your stuff?
My comics are at martianlit.com. Sequart, which does Sequart e-things, is at sequart.org. I think I'm at juliandarius.com. And, but the main thing is I love you guys and had a lot of fun.
Yes,
it has
been a joy.
100%. Ditto on that.
Yeah, so ladies, you can find obviously 20th Century Geek on all the social medias if people are still using them at 20thcenturygeek.com. And also, as you say, Waxing and Waning or Judging Dread, links to those obviously on all those websites. Go find them, and obviously on Sequart to more books. And Julian and I, we're on From Stories Out of Time and Space, our other sister podcast. We have another, we have a bunch of stuff. We're currently going through every episode of Black Mirror. But we may have another surprise for you there. We may be back. We will see. But also, we are working on a book too. We are working on a volume 1 of essays for Stories Out of Time and Space coming soon for 2024. But as well, check out the Patreon. The Patreon, we do Trek Into the Twilight Zone, 30-minute thoughts, more sort of bonusy stuff for Stories Out of Time and Space. There's loads of stuff going on over there as well. Bunch of content. So go check that out. Links down below. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Wait, what's the next story?
Oh, next story. I forget. Are we close? Oh my word! I have to go in and check. Of the list.
You're the list master.
I do. I have it written down so I can sort of go back and check.
Sorry.
No. It's a good point.
Yeah.
I should have been prepared. You're right.
You guys read.
We do read. You read. Don't let him fool you.
Here we go.
People.
Yeah. Oh, it's a goodie next. We are very close in, so it's Who Goes There and The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing.
Carpenter making a repeat appearance.
Yeah. The question is, should we do the original? Obviously, there's the original.
I think, yeah.
The Thing and The Thing from Outer Space. So, yeah.
And the Elizabeth Winstead one.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta do them all.
Christ.
Gotta
yeah. Got to catch them all. It's like
Gotta
Pokemon.
catch them all. Ramona Flowers. We're sorry that you're in that. We'll talk about it next time.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your support and for listening on. And guys, we shall see you on the next episode.